everyone. I'm so glad you're here for this episode of She Lights the Way, where every week we dive into the journeys of unsung women who are doing amazing things in our world and lighting the way for all of us. I'm your host, Nicole Huesman. I am really excited to bring you this discussion with Dr. Dawn Foster. She's Director of Data Science at the Chaos Project and a leader in the open source world. And as you'll hear, our paths have crossed for many years now. I'm proud to call her both a colleague and a friend.
So I grew up on a farm in Ohio, in kind of the middle of nowhere, and pretty much everybody I knew worked on a farm or worked in a factory or worked in a restaurant. My knowledge of what possibilities were open to me was pretty limited. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went to university and I was going to be a math teacher. And then I got into a school, and I was going to sound terrible, but I don't really like children. And this was a terrible idea. This would have made me deeply miserable for many, many years. And so at this point, I'm like broke. Like I can't afford to, do a whole lot more. And so I looked at what's my quickest path to a degree of some sort. And because the math and computer science were together in one college within the university, I'd already taken about half of the computer science courses. So I realized that I could finish a computer science degree in a relatively short period of time. So at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I got this computer science degree and then started applying for jobs, which it turns out are in like offices and businesses. And I really fundamentally did not understand how the corporate world worked. They would do quarterly meetings for the whole company, and they would talk about things like ROI. I didn't know what that meant. All of a sudden, I had stock options. I didn't know what those were either. I had a 401k. I didn't know what to do with that. So none of these were things that I had really ever had any exposure to. And this prompted me actually to go back to school and get an MBA because I wanted to understand the world around me. And I fundamentally just didn't understand what was going on from a business perspective. Like I could sit there and keep machines running, but all the other stuff, I just didn't even know what to do with. So I think my point to that story is it really doesn't matter where you come from. I think you can figure out how to make things work, how to learn new things, and figure things out as you go along.
I feel very lucky. Dawn Foster was one of my original mentors as I made my way into the world of open source years ago. Growing up on a farm in the middle of Ohio, her possibilities may have seemed limited. Years later, she's led open source strategies for some of the world's most iconic companies: Intel, VMware, Puppet Labs. Today, she's the Director of Data Science for the Chaos Project, where we're continuing to work together. During our conversation, we talk about embracing vulnerabilities, the importance of advocating for yourself, and her lifelong pursuit of knowledge. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Dawn, I can't tell you how fantastic it is for you to be here today. I don't know if many folks know this, but you were one of my original mentors as I started out in open source. And so I'm thrilled to be able to have you on today's program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
So Dawn, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what are you up to today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Dawn Foster. I am the Director of Data Science for the Chaos Project. I'm also on the governing board of Chaos. So that's my passion project. I've been involved in the Chaos Project for quite a while. I'm also, at the same time, I am a board member for an organization called Open UK. So I live here just outside of London, and I'm involved in that organization as well. And then I'm also one of the co-chairs for the CNCF Contributor Strategy Technical Advisory Group, where I'm deeply involved in the governance working group and other contributor activities within the CNCF.
So, wow, you've got a lot you've got a lot going on, and I'm not sure how you fit it all in. So, so let's take just a step back. And can you talk about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came out of university in the mid 90s with a computer science degree. So that was how I got my start in technology. And I sort of lucked into a job because I had taken one Unix system administrator class as part of my computer science undergrad. And my stepdad, actually, the company that he works for, he sent my resume to their IT department. And they were like, hey, well, we need a junior system administrator to help work with these other two really experienced ones that we have. And we'd like to interview you for that position. And I managed to get it. And that was an absolutely fabulous way to get a start in technology because, at the time, everything ran on the Unix boxes. So I got to administer DNS, a firewall, and, a whole bunch of other kind of infrastructure, some email stuff. And so I got exposed to a whole bunch of different technologies. And then at the time, I sort of wanted to climb the corporate ladder, and I realized that being a system administrator was probably not going to get me there. So I had a few other jobs. So I did some briefly software development, and then I worked on some e-commerce, e-business stuff when that was new and exciting back in the 90s before everybody had, all of their stuff online. So I was kind of early in the e-commerce, e-business sort of space. So that was kind of fun. And then, later I ended up at Intel, and that was in about 2000. And they needed someone to take a look at some Linux developer tools and some open source tools to decide which ones were going to be strategic for the Itanium processor. If you remember that one, it didn't actually go anywhere because all of your code had to be rewritten for native 64-bit technologies. So it's not great. But they looked at me and they were like, well, you did some Unix stuff. And as a part of that, I used a lot of open source technologies in my day-to-day life as a system administrator. So they're like, well, why don't you do this? And that was really my entry into working in open source on more of a full-time basis. I was there until 2006 or so, and then I worked at a couple of startups, neither of which exist anymore. I ended up at Intel again, where I was the community lead for Amigo and then Tizen, which Amigo was a really fun project. We worked with Nokia on some mobile open source operating system stuff. And then I ended up at Puppet Labs. So this was kind of getting back to my system administration roots because Puppet was a configuration management system used by system administrators. So that was an interesting role to have. And I was there for, maybe 2 or 3 years, I guess, running their community function for the organization. So that was kind of some fun technology. And that sort of got me into kind of DevOps space a bit. And then I decided that for my midlife crisis in 2015, I was going to quit my job at Puppet, sell my house and my car in Portland, and move to London on a student visa to get a PhD. So I spent 3.5 years working on my PhD, which I did successfully finish. So you can call me Dr. Dawn. And then after that, I ended up at Pivotal, where I was working on our Kubernetes contributor strategy. And then when Pivotal got acquired by VMware, I ended up in their open source program office, running their open source community strategy. And that was also a lot of fun. And then there was this opportunity within the Chaos Project. Matt was talking to me a little bit about the fact that, he wanted to get a grant to hire a data scientist. And so we were brainstorming about what this person might do. And I thought about it. And I was like, wait, I want that. Like, I want to be the data scientist for the Chaos Project. So as I reached back out to Matt, I was like, would it be weird if I asked if I could do that? Which involved a whole lot of paperwork on my side because my visa did not allow me to work for anyone other than VMware. So I had to switch to a different kind of visa. So I kind of did that in parallel while while they worked on whether or not we could get a grant. We got the grant from the Sloan Foundation. I got my new visa, and all of this allowed me to move into the data science position for the Chaos Project, which is what I'm doing now. And I've been absolutely loving it. Well, like I said, I think I said earlier that Chaos was kind of my passion project. I have a huge passion for metrics. So this has been for me.
And can I just say, I am personally thrilled that you, are there and that you are one of the leads of the Chaos Project. I think this year ahead is going to be amazing for the project with you as one of the folks at the helm of the project. I think one of the threads through your journey has been you following your passion. Can you talk about what's inspired you along your way?
So I grew up on a farm in Ohio, in kind of the middle of nowhere. And pretty much everybody I knew worked on a farm or worked in a factory or worked in a restaurant. So my knowledge of what possibilities were open to me was pretty limited, just given my background. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went to university and I was going to be a math teacher. And then I got into a school, and I was going to sound terrible, but I don't really like children. And this was a terrible idea. This would have made me deeply miserable for many, many years. And so at this point, I'm like broke. Like I can't afford to, do a whole lot more. And so I looked at what's my quickest path to a degree of some sort. And because the math and computer science were together in one college within the university, I'd already taken about half of the computer science courses, because a lot of the math courses were also counted towards the computer science degree. So I realized that I could finish a computer science degree in a relatively short period of time. So at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I got this computer science degree and then started applying for jobs, which it turns out are in like offices and businesses. And I really fundamentally did not understand how like the corporate world worked. I didn't understand how businesses worked. I would go to, they would do quarterly meetings for the whole company, and they would talk about things like ROI. I didn't know what that meant. They would talk, all of a sudden I had stock options. I didn't know what those were either. I had a 401k. I didn't know what to do with that. So none of these were things that I had really ever had any exposure to. And this prompted me actually to go back to school and get an MBA, because as part of the computer science program for my undergrad, I never took a single business course. It was not required. It was not encouraged. We did math and computer science. And so I ended up getting this MBA just because I wanted to understand the world around me. And I fundamentally just didn't understand what was going on from a business perspective. Like I could sit there and keep machines running, but like all the other stuff, I just didn't even know what to do with. So I think my point to that story is that, it really doesn't matter where you come from. I think you can figure out how to make things work, how to learn new things, and, and figure things out as you go along, I think is kind of been my strategy.
I love that.
I've taken a very opportunistic approach to my career. And in that, when I see an opportunity, if I think I'm going to learn something interesting from it, even if maybe I'm not sure where that's going to go, I've tended to take those opportunities. So I had some interesting zigzaggy paths throughout my career that I didn't really talk about when I talked about kind of, my career in the past. Twice, I took some time out of working on technology to do market research. So the first time was right after I finished being a sysadmin and decided that, if I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, I needed to do some other things. And so I was working with this group that was focused on new business development within the manufacturing company where I worked. And they had someone who was an experienced market researcher, and she needed some help. And they looked at me and they were like, well, she's going back to school to get an MBA. I bet she could do something interesting. And so I spent a year doing market research, and it really taught me how to look critically at data. And I think that this was probably my first foray into developing a passion for data, because, what I learned doing this market research is that really you can make the data say almost anything you want. And so learning how to ask the right questions, like, what was the sample size? Who did they talk to? What methods did they use for this research? It gives you a lot of insight into whether or not you can maybe trust those conclusions, or in what situations should you trust the conclusion. So it really taught me how to take kind of a critical look at data. And then I took another brief foray into it at Intel, where I also helped with a market research project. So I'd gotten frustrated with some internal open source politics at Intel for a while. And so I worked with Lori Davidson, who we both know, and I did some market research on her team for a while.
Have you had any mentors or advocates that have helped you along your way?
When I worked at Intel and I was, doing the kind of the strategic analysis for some of the open source developer tools to figure out like which ones were going to be strategic for us for the Itanium, a big part of that was evaluating the community. And so I started thinking about, what makes open source communities successful? How does the work actually happen in these communities? And then I started talking to Denise Cooper, who Intel had hired to help out with some open source stuff. And she does lots of presentations at conferences. And so she started pulling me into some kind of panels about open source, about community. And I'd never spoken at a conference before. And so this gave me loads of opportunities. And so I started getting out there and giving talks at conferences. And I gave a talk at a conference about community. And there was somebody there who was on the board of the startup that I went to for my very first like full-time open source community manager. And so I got that by really through Denise's encouragement of, getting me out there and speaking and along with that, like blogging and, some of the other more publicly facing elements that I really hadn't explored before. And those just opened up a whole new world of opportunities for me. And that was really what allowed me to pivot my career from doing more kind of program and strategy stuff that's more internal to the company to actually being in a much more outward facing full-time community manager role. So that was kind of the turning point, I think, for my career.
When we talk about your breadth of experience, what have been the things that you're proudest of or that have been most rewarding to you?
Yeah, I would say that, if I had to pick one thing that I'm the most proud of, it would be finishing that PhD and doing it in 3.5 years. So, I started the PhD, I was in my mid to late 40s, and I'd always planned on sort of retiring early and going back and getting a PhD. But I started thinking about it and I was like, wow, like everything gets harder as you get older. And maybe I shouldn't wait until I'm 55 to do this whole PhD thing, because it was just something I really wanted for myself. And it gave me an opportunity to, to spend a few years writing code, doing data analysis, learning more about some advanced statistical models. And so it was a really nice growth opportunity for me. But it's interesting, you talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, people always say they're going to do their PhD in 3 or 4 years. And then it takes them forever. And, they almost, some of them don't finish and it takes way longer than you think. So I was really proud to finish it in 3.5 years. But I think going into it as a mature adult with a 20+ year career behind me, I know how to manage projects, and a PhD is effectively a gigantic project that you have to do all yourself, but you have to be super organized and figure out what you need to do and in what order and how you're going to do that and be disciplined enough to actually get it done. So I think I had a significant advantage over some of those folks that go straight from, master's degree into a PhD.
It's an amazing accomplishment. And I am thrilled to call you Dr. Dawn. So it's hats off to you. That's an incredible accomplishment. As you look, back over your career to this point, what are the 3 most significant things you think you've learned? And what advice would you give to others?
Yes. So there are a few things I have learned over the years. The first one is if you don't tell people what you've accomplished, they probably won't notice. And frankly, that includes your manager. And I think a lot of people who are new in their career don't realize to the extent that you you need to tell your manager and the other people that you work with what you're working on, and not just what you're working on, but what the impact of that work is. Because if you don't talk about it, people aren't likely to notice, and then you aren't likely to get new opportunities and promotions and raises and the things that you really want. So you can't just sit back and wait for people to notice the work that you're doing. You really have to talk about it. And that is deeply uncomfortable for a lot of us. I think especially women in our careers is, kind of bragging about what we do. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of us, but it's something that we really do need to do to be successful. And related to that is you can't wait to ask to be included or be given an assignment. If there's something that you really want to do, sometimes you just have to invite yourself to the table and offer to take on new assignments. So you see something interesting happening. And, I had that conversation with Matt German Prey around this data science role. And if I hadn't gone back to him and said, I want that, I wouldn't have gotten it. He never would have thought I would be interested in it. I was doing something different at VMware, but I had the skills to do the data science work because that's kind of something I dabble in. And the PhD certainly gave me the skills to do that. But I don't think he ever would have thought to ask me if I wanted. You really have to, open yourself up and invite yourself to things. And the worst that someone could say is no, no, that's not appropriate, or no, we have something else in mind. But if you don't ask and if you don't step up, you're unlikely to be things.
And I think you're right. I think it may be more difficult for women to do that. And and then the other with, inviting yourself to the table. I think that's one of the beauties of the open source community. And I know I talk about that as being monolithic, but right, there are many different communities out there, but that's really, sitting back and seeing what a community needs and then saying, oh, wait a minute, that's actually part of my skill set, or that's a strength that I bring to the table. Let me offer up, hey, I can do that. And like you said, inviting yourself to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I have a third significant thing I've learned. So my third one is to really think about what makes you happy at work and figure out how you can find more of it. Because I feel like people get stuck in I think other people's expectations of what they should do. So for me, it was, you should climb the corporate ladder. You should be a corporate vice president. And I started working with a lot of corporate vice presidents as a part of a role that I had in that new business development group that I was talking about. So I was quite young. I was working with a whole bunch of corporate VPs. They had no lives. They didn't get to do anything fun. They sat in meetings all day and sacrificed a whole lot of personal life for these careers. And I realized, I was like, oh, I don't want that. So I stopped letting people kind of push me up that ladder and really just sort of taking on the roles that I wanted to do. And it worked, better or less better depending on the situation. But think about what you want to do. I mean, do you want to manage people? Do you want to continue to write code your whole career? Do you not want to continue to write code your whole career? And if not, what are some related, like program management, community management things that you can do? But think about what makes you happy and find roles that allow you to explore, and not just let people either push you up the ladder or push you into a particular type of role. Because I think that happens a lot. And this has happened to me over and over in my career, where I get sort of pushed into these program and community, even when I'm doing stuff that's frankly deeply technical. And, when I was at VMware, I was in a program manager classifications. I was I was a director, but I was, in the program management. I managed the program managers, which means I got paid less than the engineers and probably wrote more code than some of them. But you tend to, and especially I think this is a problem for women, we tend to get pushed into these alternate job titles, which are less lucrative than some of the engineering and technologist job titles. And if that's not what you want to do, then that's fine. Like don't let don't let them push you into that track either. But think about what it is that you want to do, and find that in your career.
As we wrap up, Dawn, what does She Lights the Way mean to you?
I think what it means to me is being an example for others, and in particular for other women. So I think that there are, certainly when I started my career back in the 90s, there weren't a lot of women doing what I was doing. There weren't a lot of women to look up to and to kind of see yourself in their. So I think, to me, She Lights the Way is really about being visible in the work that you're doing, and especially in some of these leadership positions. But then, then also I think helping other women realize their dreams as well. So, providing mentorship for others, talking to people who are newer in their career and giving them suggestions. Also, I think also kind of pulling people up with you, right? So thinking about, who are some people who might appreciate an opportunity to be on a podcast, or to do some interesting bit of work that has some visibility. And so how do you also give visibility to some of these other people who are newer in their careers, who might not otherwise have the opportunities? So to me, it's about being an example for people, but also then helping other people move their way up and be more successful in their careers.
That's beautiful, Dawn. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, doing all that you do. I absolutely love that we have had the opportunity to work together, beyond our life, right? Life after Intel, which is where we met. And I appreciate you. Thank you for being here.
Well, likewise, because I have also enjoyed working with you over the many years, and it's been interesting how our paths have crossed in numerous different communities along the way. So that's been fabulous, and so it's been great working with you.
Thanks so much for listening to my conversation with Dr. Dawn Foster, Director of Data Science for the Chaos Project and a leader in the open source world. You can learn more about Dawn and her work on your favorite social media platform, LinkedIn, Twitter or X, or Mastodon. You can also connect with her at one of the next KubeCon or Open UK events. And feel free to hop into any of the meetings that we have within the Chaos Project community and connect with her there. All of these links are available in the show notes. As we wrap up today's discussion, I'd love to hear what resonated most with you and how you can apply these insights to benefit you and the women around you. By taking even the smallest steps, we can light the way for ourselves and others. See you next time.